Welcome to the High Vibration Living Podcast, MacKenzie.
I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me, Whitney.
My pleasure. I'm excited to chat with you. So we're going to focus on kind of holistic and practical tips for productivity and kind of managing your life and the importance of creating a schedule and how you're able to accomplish so much more and personally feel so much more fulfilled when you put some things in place instead of just, hoping that you're going to get it together every day.
Yeah, no, I think that's one of the biggest things that I talk about with my clients and my, people who come to my courses is it's all good and fine to have a to-do list. Like a lot of us think we can live by that to-do list. And as long as we've written it down, then we're going to make it happen. But I think in practicality, we really realize that that to-do list doesn't always get done. In fact, a lot of the time it doesn't if you haven't figured out when you're going to do the things. I think
There's
that is like
10 to-do lists on my desk right now.
Yeah. And so if you don't ever attach those things to something, whether that's actually scheduling them on your calendar or pairing them with something else that you need to do, I think that's a big one. If you can be like, every time I brush my teeth or tomorrow when I brush my teeth, I'm going to do my skincare or do this one task. Like if you can mesh things together, have those like if-then scenarios, or actually like my biggest productivity hack probably is writing the to-do list, but then matching it with my plan for the next day. Actually going through, looking at my Google Calendar, and whether I put it on Google Calendar or in a planner, just actually putting those pieces into the framework of my day, because that's when you get a real grasp on how much time you actually have. Because most of the time we think we have more time than we really do.
That's really true. There's a lot that does make it onto my calendar. I live by my calendar because I'm like you. I'm a chef, I'm a podcast host. I have all these duties that I have to make sure I know that I'm committed to those days and times, but I still make lists and they never get accomplished.
Yeah.
So if somebody wanted to start to blend the two, so for instance, if I had a variety of emails that I needed to follow up on, I need to start to schedule time in my calendar for the emails.
Yeah. And I think that it's really helpful to kind of do a weekly overview. So on Saturday or Sunday, or some people even like to do it like the end of the week before. It's the way you're wrapping it up so you don't have to think about it over the weekend. But you sit down and you look over it, because how many times have we scheduled things into our Google Calendar, 6 months in advance, and then we notice that day, oh, I have a dentist appointment, or, just allow your brain to wrap itself around what is coming, I think is a really helpful tool. And you can start to kind of place those things on, oh, I might not be able to do this on Monday, but I will have some time on Wednesday where I can plug this in. So you can start to give yourself a framework, but I think that nightly planning, it only has to take you 5 or 10 minutes of actually matching the to-do list up with what is happening the next day can be a complete game changer for your productivity.
Yeah, I do it on Sundays. I always check. And then I always have to check my calendar as I'm winding down for the night before I shut down all my tech.
Yeah.
Just to make sure I have everything by the front door, everything already in the car. I find it helps if I just do a little bit of prep the night before.
Well, I think it helps because, as I'm sure you're probably going to say in like who I am and whatever, but I'm a holistic productivity coach. So there's all these parts to being able to be productive. And one of them is taking care of yourself, being able to get the rest that you need and the food that you need and all that. And I find that I rest better if I've done that planning, if I have thought through my next day. If my brain is trying to keep up with, oh, remember this thing for tomorrow and don't forget that, I'm not going to sleep as well. And then therefore I'm not going to be as productive the next day. So it can seem like it's like, oh, just frivolous or time consuming or whatever, but you're really doing so much more for yourself than just focusing on your productivity when you do that active planning.
Yeah, you're clearing space in your mind so you can really rest and digest.
Absolutely. And I think another thing that people really overlook when they are looking at their time and their planning, and this is something that I have actually created my own Google Calendar for that I put on my calendar, is car time. Because a lot of us think we have more time than we do. But if, someone like you running around all the time, has a ton of different things going on. If you're not accounting for how much time you are actually in the car, you probably think you have 2 more hours in your day than you actually do. I know that I run into that a lot with moms who are running their kids around to, different appointments and activities. If you're not accounting for the, half an hour around going to pick your kids up from school or taking them to the activity, you're not going to have an accurate picture of how much time you actually have to be able to work with.
Now, I was raised with parents that were very organized. And so they really got us involved as children in making sure that we knew our schedule for the next day. We pulled out our clothes, we put things by the front door, we packed our bags. They made us early on take responsibility. How do you like to work with your clients and teach them hand off certain duties to their kids so they aren't doing it all, but they're also teaching their kids valuable skills?
I think that is one of the biggest things to, one, give your kids great skills, but also offload some of the work from yourself. And I think that the biggest struggle I see actually in that area with moms is feeling guilty for not doing the stuff for their kids. They feel like if they aren't the one packing the bag, if they aren't the one packing the lunch, then their kid isn't going to feel taken care of or nurtured. And I have really not found that to be the case.
Yeah.
I think that you can still do so many things that are making your kids feel seen and loved on and cared for. My kids range in ages. My youngest is 9, my oldest is 18. And so having that lineup of ages, I've realized like the younger I could get them doing this stuff, the better in the long run. And now to have my 9-year-old totally be able to be self-sufficient in packing her lunch, packing that bag, being the person who she doesn't always have to ask me and rely on me for what's going on. I found that it gave her almost some instability when I hadn't turned those things over to her yet, because she never felt sure about what she was doing. But when I could not only tell her, but give her something concrete to look at, I think that was a really big game changer for her. Having the whiteboard that has the schedule on it and what she could expect from her day. For my older kids, they have their own calendars within Google Calendar so they can see what is going on. And I think that has made a huge difference in just how our life is running, but also in their skills for being able to run their own lives in the future. Now my 18-year-old, puts his work schedule on our family calendar so we can all see what's going on. And he's learning to take those skills into his real life for now going on and moving forward and having his own business and all that kind of thing.
Are particular apps or tools that have really helped you beyond Google Calendar?
I will say that is the big one. And I know that there are so many, there's an app for everything, right? And I've tried a lot of things, but what I come back to time and time again is Google Calendar, my trusty little, I will show you, I have it right here, my trusty little B6stology notebook. This is what I use as my planner. It's super simple, the way that I set it up. It's just really easy. And if I had to pick one more app or website, it would be Trello. And I am just one of those people who is very visual in the way that I look at things. I think it's the easiest platform. I've messed around with Notion and a little bit with ClickUp, but any of those I feel like have a lot more it's a higher barrier to entry. You've got to learn a lot more about the platform itself before you can actually kind of utilize it to be able to make it be a productive system for you. Where Trello is pretty straightforward. You've got lists, you've got cards, you can drag and drop things really easily. And even if you've never looked at it before, it's a really easy and versatile system to use I use it for all of my master brain dumps that I do. If I just need to get all the things down, I put it in Trello, and then I can come back to that same master brain dump when I'm feeling like I need to do another one. And then I'm like, oh, I've already accounted for a lot of these things, or oh, I've checked these things off. It doesn't even necessarily have to be something that I look at every week or sometimes even every month, but even if I come back quarterly or every 6 months, I have that master brain dump in there to be able to work off of instead of starting from scratch every time that I have to be I'm carrying all these things around in my brain.
Yeah, that's like my notes app. And I'm big on writing. I really like to write. So I am really old school and I use the yellow folders or the yellow.
Yeah.
So I'm big on the yellow notepads, and I always have one clip to a clipboard.
Yeah.
And, even when I record podcasts, I have the notepad next to me because sometimes, guests share information with me that I need to write down
Yeah.
and look up or apply to my life. So I'm still very old school with paper and pen.
I tried to go all the way digital a few years ago and it like sort of worked for a while, but then I realized it was that same thing. I had like a zillion post-it notes all over my desk. And I was like, I am still writing things down, so I need some central place to write them all down. And that's when I went back to the B6tology, because if I'm going to write anything down, that's where it's going to go. Even if I write it down on a post-it note, that post-it note is going to go in that notebook. So I'm never like looking for random things, or it could be in a whole variety of places. It's like, no, I limit myself to that one spot. So it's either in my notes app if I've written it like on my phone, or it is in that notebook, because then it eliminates so many possibilities of where I could have to go to look to find the information.
Yeah, absolutely. And then from an energetic standpoint, there's so much power in the written word. I've had so
Absolutely.
many more spiritual practitioners, and I'm talking even very senior spiritual practitioners. A lot of the teachers that I first started learning from are in their 80s now, and they always talk about when you write the words on paper, for some reason in this universe, it has more meaning, it has more power, there's more opportunity for that to come true than if you just type it on a random spot in a phone that goes somewhere, or we just say it out loud briefly and never capture it again. There's something really powerful about our hand on paper with ink. Or
Yeah, it gives it more solidity. Like you're not just
yeah.
sending it out into the ether. Like it makes it more solid. And I think beyond even that, there's so much scientific evidence about how much more we retain when we actually use our hands to write something than when we type it out. I mean, a lot of times, even if I'm doing a brain dump or I'm doing some master planning, I will even just get out like big sheets of paper that I know I'm going to throw away
Yeah.
to do that initial planning on, and then put like the more revised version into a digital format that I can work with and come back to. But it's that act of brainstorming and using like your limited resources to get it down that I think makes you more creative and just sparks different things in our brains than if we're just on a computer.
And one thing that I do as a chef is I actually always write out my grocery list, because I
Mm,
like to, as I shop, be able to physically cross it off the
mm,
list. And then that way I can see everything more easily that I need to purchase. And I can make notes and make edits on one sheet of paper. For some reason, it doesn't work when I try to do a digital note. I need it all written down. And I know that you're a big fan of meal planning and teaching people the importance of meal planning in order to be productive in their life. Can you share with me a little bit more, like why you think it's such a great time saver for?
absolutely. But I will say, to start with, that is where we are two roads that diverge in a wood, because I do not do my meal planning on paper. It is all digital, because I started years ago. I put all
Yeah.
this effort into creating this meal planning course. I was so excited about it. It was like how you could repeat menus and do all this stuff. And literally a month later, I found the most incredible app. That's when I should have mentioned that just took all that work out of like, it was like, oh,
Yeah.
they just like made it easy. And so I use Plan to Eat because I think it's just a slick system. I have all of my family's recipes in there that we use, that I know I can rely on, that everybody likes. It automatically makes my shopping list for me, so I'm never forgetting my shopping list at home, which has happened too many times. It automatically puts everything to the stores that I typically buy those products at, which is helpful for me. Puts them in the different sections of the stores. So like for me, that just like helps my brain work. But I think this is something that a lot of families resist doing. But if
Mhm.
you just will meal plan, that's like the number one thing you can do to save yourself so much mental energy, so much time, so much money. Like it is like my greatest fear to walk into a grocery store with no plan. I'm like, I can't. I will sit in the car on my app and do my planning beforehand, because I I just feel like a kid lost in the woods if I don't have some sort of plan. But it's a
Yeah.
nightmare to have 4 o'clock come around and people in your house start asking you what's for dinner. If you don't know what's for dinner, or two, you don't have the ingredients, that's just a recipe for stress. And I think it's one of those things that kind of just hangs over you all day long. Like, you have to figure it out. Dinner is coming every single day. But if you don't have a plan, it is inevitable that it's going to be a frustration. You're probably going to cut corners. You're probably going to spend more money than you otherwise would. And so if you can do it and you can get past the idea, I know a lot of people are like, I don't want to be locked in to what I have to have on certain nights. Well, then just plan out like the general meals that you're going to have that week so that you can have those ingredients on hand and you can make it work for you. For me, I like to know I pick my meals based on what we're doing that night. So I know like Monday nights are usually typically like very busy. My kids have a ton going on, so I need to have a crock pot meal that I will have put together earlier in the day. And then Tuesdays are also pretty busy, so I should probably make enough of the crock pot meal that we can have leftovers. Like, I think through all those things in advance. But then because I know what kind of meals I'm having each night of the week, I can really easily sit down and plan an entire month, because rather than going day by day through the week, I just go, okay, what are 4 crock pot meals that are easy for me to do on a Monday? And I will just plug in all the Mondays. And then, okay, I know Tuesdays are all going to be leftovers. Now, Wednesdays, maybe we're going to do taco night or whatever. Like, I can simplify that process instead of going, okay, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, like, and then okay, now we're doing the next week. Like, no, you can make that fast. And then I also love making it into a menu. So it's like, okay, I have 4 weeks now planned. I can repeat this over and over again throughout this whole season, because I do typically like to eat a little bit more seasonally. So maybe you're going to have 3 or 4 menus that you repeat throughout the season, and you've taken so much of the work out of it for yourself. So it doesn't have to be as scary as it sounds.
No, and then you can pull year after year. So even as a personal chef, most of my clients I've cooked for over 5 years. So I go back and look and I see what we were doing, in 2019 and 2018 or in 2020. And so I'm pulling from the same season, but just older menus. So we can revitalize or bring something back that maybe we haven't had for a while. When we get kind of stagnant and we see that we're always choosing the same things and kind of nothing else out there is exciting us. I think it's a great tool to have tracked, a little bit about what you eat. And I think it actually helps bring more joy back to eating, because we can get into ruts and sometimes trying to figure out what to cook can be exhausting. So it's nice when you have a place where you can just look back and see what you've done in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, if you are in that rut, but you don't want to completely overhaul everything you're doing and come up with, 7 new recipes that you're going to make or whatever, you can just sprinkle in one. You can rely on those things that you know that your family loves and will eat over and over again until the cows come home. But then just sprinkle in something when you know you have a night where you can add a little bit more time to when you're cooking and try something new. And then that can become part of the rotation, just to kind of break up that monotony. I think that can be really helpful too.
Are there a few things that you try to always make sure are in your fridge every week or every other week?
We do a lot of tacos. So there's a lot of chicken, and like we just kind of have like those basics, I feel like, always around, because we'll do like a huge thing of chicken or of beef, and then we'll spread it out into quesadillas, or maybe one night we'll make it into enchiladas. But it's an easy one where you can make kind of like a staple protein and then stretch it into a lot of different ways. And so it feels like you're eating something different, even though it's kind of the same thing. But that's probably the one that we rely on the most, for sure.
I love that. Well, and in this day and age too, you can really mix that up, because there's so many different types of tortillas you can do.
Oh yeah.
So you can go to your health food store and buy a variety of, sprouted corn or whole wheat or wheat tortillas, but you can also get cassava and almond flour and jicama. And, as open as you want to be, you can make your own masa. You can just constantly change the taco game these days.
Yeah. Absolutely. And we had kind of gotten into the rut of like, okay, we're doing a lot of tacos, but we always do them where we're like frying them up and it takes all this effort and all this time. And it was like everybody loved them, but it took so much time. I was like, we're doing taco bowls, and we got into like a taco bowl season. So it wasn't as much effort to put them together, but everybody loved it. And I think anytime you can kind of like take something you're familiar with, but shake it up a little bit, present it in a different way, it helps it to feel new and fresh. And people aren't as like annoyed with it or like, we just had this a week ago. It's the same basic ingredients, but for some reason it seems totally different.
Now, when I meal prep for myself, obviously I do this for other people, but when I do it for myself, I do it on Sundays and I do it on Wednesdays. Those are my bigger cook days. What are the days that you take to get the food prep that you need for the week or the grocery shopping you need done for the week?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, I like to have it done by like a Friday, Saturday that we've done the planning, because usually it's my boyfriend and I, we live across the street from each other. So we come together for a lot of meals. And so we usually try to like coordinate what it is we think we're going to have throughout the week. If it were up to me, we'd be planning for like 2 or 3 weeks at a time, but he is like, that's too much for him to think about. So it's usually about a week. And then I will typically go on Sundays. That's my usual day, my preferred day. If I leave it until Monday, it's going to be chaos, but sometimes it happens. But most of the time I like to be able to go on like a Sunday afternoon and just get everything for the week, so we're ready to go. And then sometimes I'll know like I'm going to pick up the basic things that we're going to need for the majority of the week, but then maybe I'm going to run on a Thursday and get a couple of more things to take us through the end of the week and the weekend to get just like the fresher ingredients and that sort of thing.
How do you manage staying productive, keeping your family organized, meal prepping, cooking, when you personally are going through a low energy time? How are you able to kind of keep the train running when your tank is empty or you're feeling physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally down?
I
Because
think
it's a lot to keep it going.
it is. It is a lot. And I think that having those weeks where, like a lot of times I try to sync a lot of my planning and productivity up with my cycle, like having that forward thinking of when I know I'm automatically not going to be in tip-top shape. And there are other, of course, life stressors that come in and everything. But I had one of my followers the other day who I thought said it really well, that luteal week, it's like, not that you're extra touchy, not that you're unreasonable, but that like everything feels magnified and everything can feel even more tiring and exhausting. And so I do try to account for those things. Like maybe this is going to be a week where we're pulling more out of the freezer that like I've pre-prepped in advance, or we're doing more leftovers on days. We're going to make those tacos really stretch that week. Yeah. Or that's a week where I will, like, my boyfriend will know, I'd be like, you need to take these couple of nights because I just don't have it in me, or I'm going to be extra busy. And I think the biggest part of that though is looking down the road a little ways, seeing it coming so that it doesn't sneak up on you and you're not stuck in a situation where you're like, oh, well, I'm exhausted, but I have no choice. Everybody has to eat. So you either push through and drain yourself more, or you're like, everybody's eating cereal. Nobody wants that. So I think that like having that forward perspective, doing a little bit of planning in advance, knowing that those times are going to come pretty regularly, I think helps you to not get caught off guard by it.
What about when someone has to work from home, whether it's a mother or a father or a young entrepreneur, they're working from home? What tips do you usually share to your clients to stay productive when you're always in the same space?
I think remembering that you're working is a big one, because a lot of people feel like, well, I'm at home, so I should be able to do these cleaning tasks, or I should be able to go and prep our food, or also everyone else in the house expects that you should be doing those things. And I think really like holding pretty solidly to what your work hours are and acknowledging that you are a working person. Yeah. It is not time for you to be working on your house, and you have to, or the meals or whatever, you have to set that time aside, just like you would if you were working out of the home, that you're going to have to fit in your cleaning and your other things in evenings or on weekends, and create a sustainable routine that is going to work for you and your family in those times, but just know that you need to commit to the work. Otherwise, the two bleed together too much and it becomes frustrating in both ways. And I don't think that either side of things, the home or the business, really get the justice that they deserve when so much is bleeding together.
Is there a time that we should consider starting work when we work from home? I think that tends to bleed. The moment we get up, it's really easy to think I need to start working. And then you look at the clock and you realize it's not even 7 a.m. yet. You wouldn't even be in the office. How should someone create that structure?
I think it's really personally dependent and what other demands you have on you. I think a lot of that you can customize it. I mean, that's one of the great things about working from home is that you can customize your work hours. And like for me, having, especially in the summer, goodness, my kids are here like all the time, which is great, but also hard. And so for me, it works best if I can get up pretty early and jump straight into work and try to get as much done as I can before they're up and around so that I'm able to be done earlier in the day and maybe spend some time with them. Or like I'm a voice actor and a podcaster, so I need a lot of quiet time. So trying to get those things done before they're going to be up and making their breakfast and taking showers and everything, it benefits all of us. They get less frustrated with having to stay quiet. I get less frustrated with people making noise in the house, but it gives me then the leeway that when they do get up, maybe I can take an hour or two off to just be with them and hang out with them during breakfast or whatever it is. It gives me that leeway. But so I don't think there's any one time to say like, this is the magical time that you should start if you're a work from home person. I think you really have to look at your own life circumstances and see what's going to work. And also to know that it's constantly going to change.
Yeah.
And so it's okay to reevaluate pretty frequently to see what's working right now.
So you, like you mentioned, you have your own podcast. You've interviewed a bunch of, guests specifically on, how to manage your life, how to live well anyway. Are there maybe 3 guests that really have brought up something over the past few months that have really resonated with you and you've applied it to your life?
Yeah, I've had some really fun guests coming on lately. I think a lot of wellness experts. And so that's been really fun to talk about, just like thinking about your wellness. And specifically, the episode isn't going to be out for a little while, but Dr. Sharp, she's a functional health medicine doctor, but also an integrated health medicine, and she started in internal medicine. And so it was so interesting to hear pull all of these different like Western and Eastern modalities together and how we can be looking at our health in a more holistic way, because I think it's so important in order to be productive, in order to be, entrepreneurs and doing this thing that we do take care of ourselves and we're able to be healthy, or we can't do the work that we need to do. So I really loved that episode. And then I also had on Nikki Tucker recently, and she's actually a divorce financial analyst. And I went through a divorce 7 years ago, and man, do I wish I would have had her in my corner back then to give me a lot of helpful information. So we talk about that in the episode of like how to make divorce more financially feasible and not have it bury you. But then she also had just some really great general financial tips that I think anyone, especially women, should be paying attention to. How to budget things, how to make it realistic to have savings if you don't just have like oodles of cash flowing in, like kind of stepping away from some of the standard models that we hear that can feel really overwhelming and can kind of be defeating to people. But she had some really great, just practical advice for thinking about your own personal finances wherever you are at on the financial spectrum and like how to move forward from there.
Yeah, because the typical advice I feel like we've all heard is just stop going to Starbucks or stop going for that coffee date. Stop giving yourself that, $5 treat. It used to be like, $2.50. It's $5 treat now.
Yeah.
What is something that she suggested to do instead? Because we found that when you take away that treat, it's really not about the treat. It's about the community and the connection and how it sparks joy in your routine. What can you do instead that allows you to save money?
Well, that was one of the things I loved about her. She specifically said, like, I'm a latte girl. I'm never going to tell you to give up your latte. And I was like, thank you. But she really talked about like looking at your finances personally, that if somebody is saying like, you need to save $5,000 or 3 months of bills, instead of just being like, well, there goes that. I'm not even going to try. She was like, just look at what you can do. Look at whatever it is that you are capable of doing and do that. because even doing something small is better than not doing anything at all. And she also talked about, like, with budgeting software and that sort of thing, how important it is to find something that you will actually use, because she's like, same kind of as I was saying with, there's a million different planning apps out there, there's a million different financial apps out there, and the most important part is finding one that you will actually put into place. Like, she still loves using Excel for all of her budgeting. You know, that's what she does for a living. And she's tried all the apps, but she goes back to that. And so I think it's really important remembering that we're all different. We all have different personalities. And so whether it's your planning or your finances or your meal planning or whatever it is, finding the tools that you will actually utilize is the most important part.
Yeah, keep going until you find the one that clicks for you. It's like finding a new workout routine. You just have to keep testing different routines until you find the one that really feels right.
Yeah. And then having that iteration be part of it, like I just mentioned a minute ago, like, where things are constantly changing in our lives. We constantly have different dynamics. And so taking that into account, that maybe the season has changed for the routine that you're doing, or you need to use a different planning style because the logistics of your life have changed. It's okay. It's okay to shift gears and maybe come back to the thing that you're using later when it works better for you again. But just, you've not failed if something isn't working for you. You just need to find what works for you.
Well, with that in mind, this great advice some of your podcast guests have recently given to you. What about wellness? Like, what are some of the new wellness routines, products that you've started adopting?
Oh, well, I have a lot of wellness products that I think that I love. I think there's a couple that I come back to time and time again, mostly because of simplicity, that I like to combine things and like simplify things as much as I can. I'm a big believer in AG1. I think it's like such a great product for just covering like a lot of bases. I always feel better when I'm taking it really consistently. So I love that one. I love Armra Colostrum. It's another one I feel like is super easy to just throw in my coffee, and I don't have to like do it as a separate thing. So in my coffee in the morning right now, it's actually, I've just discovered Everyday Dose, which I love because it has mushrooms. So it's got like adaptogens in it. And then it also has amino acids, which are great for building muscle and, you know, thinking about longevity and all that kind of thing. And it's got a very low dose of caffeine, and it's like an instant thing. You put it in your water, and I mix that with my Armra Colostrum and creatine. So I feel like it gives me like this punch first thing in the morning of covering all my bases. I've got my dosed up coffee and my AG1, and then I feel like I'm like good to go for the day.
So that's what's really fueling you. Are there any kind of practices that you're also incorporating from a wellness perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think that sometimes you get into it and you don't even realize, like, they become very normal to you. So you're like, oh yeah, that's like a thing that I do that is wellness. I love gua sha and rolling. I think those are super helpful, just like for the lymphatic drainage and feeling good about even the way that I look and whatnot. And so I like to do those in the morning, pretty much first thing when I get out of bed. I'm always using my roller, and like, especially if it's cold, kind of just like helping to depuff myself and feel like I'm going into the day really well. I really love Train Well, the app that actually matches you with a trainer, and I use it in conjunction with my watch, and she completely customizes all of my workouts for me. So whether I'm like, I can only, you know, devote 10 minutes, or I want to focus on my legs or whatever, she creates a routine that works perfect for me, and it changes. And that's been a really big game changer for me on the wellness front. And then almost every night I take an Epsom salt bath. And so you know, people might think it's just like a luxury thing, but I've found a lot of wellness benefits from it. It's also great for lymphatic drainage and detoxing. And I find that as somebody who's always struggled with insomnia and falling asleep, it's like one of those triggers that I can give myself to like, okay, I'm winding down for the night. It's like when I'm not going to watch anything that's like about business, or, you know, like I'm going to now be switching that gear into letting my brain kind of shut off and just relax. And I mean, I will set a timer and only do it for 10 or 15 minutes. It doesn't have to be like this big, you know, hours long luxury spa experience. It's just like, my kids know, everybody knows, like, all right, mom's shutting down for the night. I'm going to go
Yeah.
take my bath and be done.
Yeah, I find I do a lot in the winter time. It just deeply warms my bones.
Mm-hmm.
But agreed, you get the best night's sleep. It's just
Yep.
so good for the physical body. I feel like it's so good for the spiritual body because we know
Mm-hmm.
that salt gets rid of all, whether you believe it or not, negative energy and psychic debris. And it just provides this beautiful, invisible, kind of barrier around you just to keep you energetically safe. And you can feel it. You just feel good and clean on
Mm-hmm.
so many levels.
Yeah.
That a
And
shower can,
grounded.
yeah, and a
Yeah.
shower can just not
Yeah.
replace the tub.
Yeah, there's something about that soaking and I did there it was probably last week we've been having a total heat wave where I live and it was the first time where I got out and I was like, "Oh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this for the next week or so cuz it is warm."
Yeah,
But generally it's a pretty year-round practice that it's just like my checkout time.
I completely understand. Where do you turn to keep learning and growing as an entrepreneur and in your businesses and as a podcast host? How do you find the new things that inspire you and make you curious?
Well, I mean, I hate to say this, but Instagram and podcasts a lot of the time. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like I have curated who I watch and who I really like and I align with and I agree with. And if they recommend someone else to me or they recommend a book, that's probably going to be something that I'm at least going to, check out and see if it's going to be something that I'm going to pursue. I also think it helps being a podcaster because I get a lot of things pitched to me. So that's also another way that I find a lot of people, I find a lot of books and even YouTube. I would say I have those like trusted people who you can see the proof in the pudding of what they're doing, whether it's wellness or productivity or business that I come back to again and again, whether it's because of their advice or their personality or you find kind of those sweet spots. And generally once I find kind of like those staple people, I'm going to probably trust who they point me toward to find new information.
Yeah, absolutely. Where can people continue to learn from you? Where can they connect with you and get more productivity tips and listen to your podcast?
Absolutely. Well, you can find me at MacKenzieKoppa.com, and that's got links to everything that I do. But you can find me on both Instagram and YouTube at MacKenzie Koppa. I'm very active on both of those platforms. I'm really excited about everything that I'm doing on YouTube right now. I actually am conducting a morning show this summer on both YouTube and Instagram. So you can join me around 6 a.m. Pacific time and just get your day rolling. And we all hang out and we talk about the 3 things that we're going to do that day to be productive. And then you can find my podcast, Live Well Anyway, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Perfect. And could you leave our guests with maybe one healthy tip they can consider adding into their life?
I think allowing yourself to pause. I am someone who is very focused on productivity. I'm a 3 on the Enneagram. That's how I feel like I have, contributed to the world and done a good job is being productive. But even if it takes putting it on your list to do, to give yourself a break and let yourself check out. If you need to check that off the list in order to make it something okay to do that for yourself because you're going to burn out if you don't. You've got to give yourself that white space in order to allow yourself to be productive in all the rest of the time.
Thank you so much for these tips today, especially just the reminder that it really needs to get on the calendar off the list. I think that is huge for everybody. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me on. I really appreciate you inviting me.